My husband was away on a business trip, or at least, that's what he told me. I had no reason to doubt him until I decided to surprise him for his birthday. That was when my entire world shattered. Robbie and I have been married for 3 years. We're both 31, and our story goes back nearly a decade. We met at our first job, both fresh out of college, both eager to prove ourselves. We clicked instantly, bonding over the struggles of being the company's youngest employees. A friendship blossomed, and by the time our internship was wrapping up, Robbie finally asked me out. We tried dating, but we were young, still figuring life out. It didn't last. Years passed. We lost touch. Then, at 25, fate, or something like it, brought us back together at a mutual friend's party. We reconnected, reminiscing about old times, and one thing led to another. We admitted we had both dated other people in the years in between, but nothing ever quite worked. Maybe, we thought, it was because we were meant to be together. Running into each other felt like a sign, so we took the leap and gave our relationship another shot. This time, it worked. We were older, wiser, and more committed. 3 years flew by, and after a year of living together, marriage just felt like the natural next step. There was no grand proposal, just a mutual agreement that this was right. So, we tied the knot. Life was good. We had our share of arguments, sure, but nothing major. Robbie never gave me a reason to doubt him. He was steady, dependable. I trusted him completely. Which is why, when I found out the truth, my whole world turned upside down. My husband had a whole other life, a secret family hidden in the shadows of our marriage. The betrayal cut deep. And in my devastation, I might have done something people now tell me was too extreme. They say I should have handled it privately, kept our issues behind closed doors. But I don't see it that way. He lied to me, deceived me, shattered the life I thought we had. Why should I be the one to protect his image? It all started a few weeks ago. Robbie's birthday was coming up, and I wanted to make it special. But when I brought it up, he told me he had a business trip that week and wouldn't be home to celebrate. I was disappointed. Birthdays are a big deal to me, but I accepted it. Or at least, I did until an idea struck me. Why not surprise him? I envisioned showing up at his hotel, catching him off guard with a romantic gesture. A celebration just for us. It had been a while since we'd taken a trip together, so maybe we could even turn it into a mini getaway. Both of us run businesses. Mine is an electronics store, while Robbie inherited his father's PR agency. He's always been more successful, but I never minded. I was proud of him. We were a team. His success was my success. That's what marriage is about, right? I arranged everything through his secretary, who seemed genuinely happy to help. She booked a room for 2, informed the hotel staff, and made sure I'd have access to his suite. Everything was set. I was thrilled, imagining the look of surprise and joy on his face when he saw me. The morning of his birthday, I flew out to meet him. I knew his meetings would be over by noon, so I arrived around 2 p.m., giving myself the perfect window to surprise him. But the moment I stepped into the hotel, something felt off. The receptionist gave me an odd look when handing me the key card. A knowing glance, laced with something I couldn't quite place. Pity? Concern? I brushed it off, too caught up in my excitement to dwell on it. I took the elevator up, my heart pounding with anticipation. As I approached his door, I noticed something strange. The door was slightly ajar. And then I heard voices. A woman's voice. A child's laughter. Confusion gripped me. Who was he with? Why was there a child in his room? My pulse quickened as I hesitated, peering through the small opening. What I saw stole the breath from my lungs. Robbie sat on the bed, smiling, playing with a little boy who couldn't have been older than 5 or 6. Beside him, a woman around my age watched them with a warm, affectionate gaze. They looked like a family. A happy, carefree family. My worst nightmare had come to life. And I was standing there, frozen, watching the truth unravel right before my eyes. I didn't get a clear look, but Robbie and that boy were huddled together over an iPad, their laughter spilling into the air. And I'm no fool. I've read enough books, seen enough movies, I knew exactly what was unfolding before my eyes. My gut twisted, warning me to get out before I uncovered more than I could handle. I needed to move, fast. But before I bolted, I had the presence of mind to do one thing. I snapped a picture. Proof. Evidence of what I'd seen, even if I still wasn't ready to process it. Then, heart pounding, I turned and ran. I didn't stop. I charged out of the hotel, breathless, and flagged down the first cab in sight. The second I was inside, I ordered the driver to take me straight to the airport. I didn't care about anything else. I needed to leave, needed to erase whatever I had just witnessed from my mind. Maybe, if I didn't confront it, it wouldn't be real. But that's not how reality works, is it? At the airport, I managed to book a seat on the next available flight home. A 2-hour wait stretched ahead of me, but it felt like an eternity. In that time, I went through every stage of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally, the crushing weight of acceptance. I kept replaying every moment in my head, every glance from the receptionist that now made perfect sense. She had known. They all had. And I was the only idiot left in the dark. My mind scrambled for an explanation, an innocent reason for what I had seen. But no matter how I twisted the facts, the truth was staring me in the face. Robbie had another family. A hidden life I knew nothing about. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore, it was an undeniable reality. The realization hit me like a freight train, and for hours, I clung to the last shreds of denial. But there was no running from it. By the time I got home, exhaustion mixed with betrayal, weighing me down. My marriage was over. There was no question about it. But what came next? Confrontation? Accusations? No. I knew Robbie too well. If I faced him head on, he would spin a story, weave some intricate lie, and I, fool that I was, might just believe him. I couldn't take that risk. I had to be smarter. So I devised a plan. I needed proof, something irrefutable that he couldn't wriggle his way out of. Financial records, money always left a trail. If he was supporting a second family, there had to be payments. I reached out to his secretary, someone I had always been on good terms with. Spinning a quick lie, I told her I urgently needed Robbie's financial statements for the past 3 years. I claimed our lawyer had requested them to double-check for any discrepancies before an upcoming audit. It was a harmless enough excuse, and she bought it without question. Within hours, I had everything I needed in my hands. With the help of my lawyer, I pored over his bank statements, line by line, transaction by transaction. And there it was. Every month, without fail, a substantial payment sent to an account tied to the very city where he claimed to be going for business trips. At first, I wanted to believe it was professional, a client, a partner, something justifiable. But deep down, I already knew the truth. And now, I had proof. I wasted no time. The moment I confirmed everything, I contacted one of the best divorce attorneys in town. I wasn't going to let this slide. There was no salvaging this. Robbie had been living a double life, and he was about to lose everything. But surprisingly, my first instinct wasn't sadness, it was rage. Pure, unfiltered rage. He had made a fool of me, wasted years of my life, and I wasn't about to let him walk away unscathed. So, I played my part. For days, I acted like nothing was wrong. I let him think everything was just as it had always been. I even apologized for my distant behavior, pretending I had just been stressed. I needed him to believe it, to suspect nothing. And in the meantime, I planned my revenge. Robbie was set to return in a few days. I needed to keep my act together until then. I made sure his secretary stayed quiet, spinning another lie about how I never actually got to visit him because I had fallen sick. I told her not to mention a word of it to him. I didn't want him to worry, after all. She agreed, and my cover remained intact. The real surprise, however, was yet to come. On the evening of his return, I threw him a party. A grand one. I invited friends, family, colleagues, people he respected, people whose opinions mattered to him. I even invited a potential business partner, someone he had been desperate to impress. It was all coming together perfectly. When he arrived, I greeted him with open arms, faking every bit of warmth and affection. It made my skin crawl, but I had to be convincing. I led him into the living room, where everyone cheered for him. He smiled, soaking in the attention, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. Then came the best part. The cake. As I unveiled it, the room fell into stunned silence. There, printed onto the cake for everyone to see, was the damning image I had taken, the picture of Robbie with his other family. The proof of his betrayal, immortalized in icing. His face drained of color. His eyes darted around the room, desperate for an escape. But there was none. He had been caught. I watched him squirm, watched him try to formulate some kind of excuse. But there was nothing left to say. Everyone saw the truth now. And I wasn't done yet. As he stammered, pleading for me to stop, I simply smiled. Because the real show had only just begun. For the first time in my life, I told Robbie to shut up. The words cut through the air like a knife, silencing the murmurs around us. He wasn't going to talk his way out of this. Not this time. I had let him get away with too much, but tonight, in front of everyone he ever cared about impressing, I was going to expose him for the liar he truly was. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, then let the truth spill from my lips. I told them how I had gone through his financial records, how I had discovered that every single month for nearly a decade, he had been sending money, hush money, guilt money, to his other family. A family I never even knew existed. A family he had been hiding from me for the entire duration of our relationship. The weight of my revelation pressed down on the room, suffocating and heavy. I turned to him, waiting for a response, waiting for him to at least attempt to deny the undeniable. But he just stood there, frozen, his face drained of color. He wouldn't speak. He refused. And that only made me push harder. I taunted him, daring him to open his mouth and try to justify his betrayal. I wanted him to feel the humiliation I had felt when I showed up at his hotel room and saw him sitting comfortably with another family, as if they were the ones he had always belonged to. And then, he broke. The mask shattered, and out came the fury. He yelled, his voice raw and unhinged. Yes, he had another family. Yes, he had been lying. But it was none of my business. He regretted marrying me. He should have chosen Elena. That name struck me like a slap. Elena. His supposed affair partner. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but I refused to back down. My shock quickly hardened into anger. We launched into a bitter, venomous argument right there in front of his family, his friends, his business partners, everyone who once thought he was an upstanding man. He spat out the truth in a rage. He and Elena had been seeing each other before we reconnected. Back then, they weren't serious. That's why he pursued me again. But a few months into our relationship, Elena reached out. She was pregnant. She wanted to know if he was going to be a father to their child or walk away. He claimed he wanted to tell me. That he almost did. But he was terrified of losing me. So he decided to wait. Just a few months, he told himself. Long enough for the baby to be born, long enough to figure things out. But then, months stretched into years. And suddenly, we were getting married, and he had dug himself into a hole so deep there was no way out. So he kept lying. And then, the ultimate betrayal, he admitted that his affair with Elena wasn't just a past mistake. It had resumed. Recently. It had started a few months ago, because, in his words, he was sick of me. Sick of me. He had been seeing her more often, growing closer, and she had no problem with their arrangement because he had promised her something. He had sworn to her that he would leave me. that he would make it right when the time was right. And now, apparently, he had made up his mind. He was going to divorce me. His words were sharp, cutting deep, but I refused to let them shatter me. My heart might have been breaking, but I wasn't going to let him see it. Instead, I met his fury with cold, calculated control. If he wanted a divorce, fine. I had already beaten him to it. I stormed off, straight to my study, grabbed the divorce papers I had filed, and shoved them into his hands. "Here," I hissed. "Sign them. I'm already ahead of you." Then I walked out. I didn't look back. I climbed into my car, my hands shaking as I gripped the wheel. The bag I had packed earlier sat in the passenger seat, a silent reminder that I had planned for this. I knew exactly where I was going, which hotel I would be staying at. I had prepared for my escape. I refused to let myself fall apart. Not yet. For hours, I didn't check my phone. I didn't want to see the messages, the missed calls. But when I finally did, I was met with a wave of opinions I hadn't expected. People thought I went too far. Friends, family, they all said the same thing. Yes, Robbie had betrayed me, but throwing a party just to humiliate him? That was cruel. That was excessive. And now, because of me, he had lost the biggest business deal of his career. Some even suggested that I owed him an apology. An apology? Apparently, the CEO he had been trying so hard to impress had no interest in working with a man who had just been publicly exposed as a liar and a cheater. Robbie had tried to salvage it, had chased after the CEO as the party fell apart. But the man had been firm. He had told Robbie, in the most polite way possible, that maybe now was the time to focus on his personal life. That his firm didn't need this kind of drama. That the deal was going to someone else. The rejection had been swift. Public. Humiliating. Just like he deserved. The moment he walked out the door, Robbie crumbled. His shoulders shook, his hands trembled, and tears streamed down his face. Some of the guests lingered, hesitant, exchanging awkward glances before gathering around him in hushed whispers, offering words of comfort. But me? I found it laughable. He wasn't crying because he had lost me, he was crying because he had lost control. He destroyed everything with his lies, his selfishness, his betrayal. And yet, somehow, I was the villain. I refused to accept that. But people wouldn't let it go. Text after text flooded my phone. Accusations. Condemnation. People telling me that what I did was cruel, that I had gone too far. Even my own parents, the ones who should have stood by me, looked at me like I was the problem. I was sick of it. Sick of being blamed. Sick of carrying the weight of his sins. Robbie didn't deserve my pity, and he sure as hell didn't deserve an apology. That wasn't happening. But the judgment? The whispers? They were relentless. So, was I wrong for exposing my husband's filthy secret? For tearing the mask off the life he had so carefully constructed? Some seemed to think so. But I knew better. The support I received in the aftermath was overwhelming. Thousands of people, strangers who didn't even know me, saw the truth. They validated everything I had done. It gave me the strength I needed to cut out anyone who insisted on painting me as the villain. If they refused to acknowledge what I had been through, then they had no place in my life. I even considered showing my parents and so-called friends the messages of those who said I had every right to go even further. Maybe then they'd understand just how deep this betrayal ran. Maybe then they'd stop acting like I had overreacted. But they wouldn't understand. They hadn't lived it. They hadn't built a life with someone only to watch it crumble under the weight of deception. Did humiliating him make me feel better? No. But that didn't mean I regretted it. Not for a second. Now, with the party behind me, I had only one thing left to focus on, the divorce. And the full impact of what had happened was finally setting in. The grief. The anger. The exhaustion. People kept telling me how miserable Robbie was, as if I should care. as if I should be the one to fix it. But I wasn't going to carry that burden anymore. I decided that every single person who dared to guilt trip me would hear the truth. They could either drop it or they'd be cut off permanently. No more patience. No more excuses. If they wanted me in their lives, they had to admit they were wrong. I wasn't going to tolerate anyone defending a cheater. Not anymore. Then the divorce papers came. My lawyer informed me that Robbie had agreed to a mutual split. Relief flooded through me. For once, things were going my way. I told my parents and the few friends who still spoke to me. Most of them stayed silent. That silence told me everything I needed to know. They were never truly my friends, they were his. But my parents? They finally saw the truth. They apologized. Said they had felt sorry for Robbie, watching him unravel, watching the life he had so meticulously crafted come crashing down. His parents were furious, convinced I had no right to expose his secret. No right? I was his wife. If anyone had the right to know, it was me. And yet, they had been complicit in his lies, shielding him, protecting his double life. I didn't care what they thought. Not anymore. And honestly, I was glad his career was in shambles. He deserved to lose everything, just as I had. I wasn't some saint who wished him well. No, I hoped karma would come for him, full force. And for everyone who took his side. They could all disappear as far as I was concerned. I had no regrets. None. Not before, not during, not after. Robbie got exactly what he deserved. Almost a year had passed since I first filed for divorce. It was finalized months ago. Freedom! That was what it felt like. Robbie had moved on, dragging his mistress and their son into his new reality. Good for him. I, on the other hand, was thriving. My business had taken off, and I had built a new life, one that had nothing to do with him. I had a better home, financial success, and the peace I had been missing for years. Dating? Not on my radar just yet. But when the time was right, I knew I'd find someone who truly deserved me. Looking back, I could finally see the truth. Robbie's betrayal had been a gift in disguise. Without it, I wouldn't have this life. Wouldn't have found my strength. Wouldn't have carved out a future entirely my own. So, no. I didn't regret exposing him. I didn't regret making him face the consequences of his choices. Everything happened exactly as it was meant to. And now, I was free.